Hey guys, Fox here, and today it's time for my 2025 UFL Week 9 Power Rankings. We are just 2 weeks away from the regular season being over, and while we do know all four playoff teams and sadly where both playoff games are going to be for other circumstances, we still got 2 more weeks to play, and of course it's time to look at the Power Rankings for this past week. Now, once again, very little change from last week's to this week. Now, a big reason for that is I kind of correctly predicted a couple of the teams moving down slash up and how they would perform to where it kind of made what I put last week make sense, aside from two teams that obviously needed to switch. Now, we're also going to be looking at two head coach or not head coach. For those of you who remember that video from about like 5 weeks ago, I did this for the quarterbacks that were starting back in like week 3. So, time to do the same thing, but for the head coach position. So, without further ado, number 8, the Brahmas. You lost to Tank Ball. I mean, I could literally just put the final score on here and not a single soul could argue with it. The fact is, yes, you put up a lot of yardage and a lot of stats you actually looked somewhat better. But what you weren't is turnovers, penalties, right? We all know the Kevin Hogan penalty at about the 5-yard line where he threw it directly into a defensive player who was in front of him by about 2 yards. It was bad. They lost in overtime. The Showboats now undefeated in OT, 2-0. So, congrats to them getting the W, but the Brahmas, man, this was a rough one to lose. You had almost no excuse to lose considering the fact that you did outplay them in so many areas, but you did lose. Once again, your defense is still pitiful. Despite DC allowing over 30 points again, you're still tied with them on worst in points allowed. Yards per game, you are worst in the league at 311. Now, your offensive yards per game, even though you just thoroughly outgained Memphis in this game, guess what? Still last. Then third down percentage, Memphis, they're catching up to you. So really, really bad there. Those three stats to be tied for last and then last in yards, dead last in yards per game on offense, and barely above last place in third down percentage when you two are by far the worst two teams in the league, and you lost to them in the Tank Bowl, yeah, there's no arguing for this team anywhere else but 8. There's no blown lead or there's no falling off a cliff that any other team could do to justify this team moving anywhere. The fact is, they are number 8. There's really no arguing. It really does suck, especially considering how much better this team was last year, but it's being a dead horse at this point. This team's defense fell off a cliff. They have a couple linebackers, and that's pretty much their whole team. And I guess like a safety, but number 8, the Brahmas. Now, Peyton Pardee, 2 head coach, not head coach. I'm actually going to say 2 head coach. Now, the biggest reason for this is the first 2 weeks under him, and also to an extent, week 7 and hell, week 8. The first 2 weeks of the season, the offense was run by A.J. Smith. Then he left. Since he's left, in 4 of the 6 games they've played, they've put up over 20 points. And yes, one of them was, of course, the punt return touchdown. But even then, it's still more than 10 points, which the last 3 games A.J. Smith coached, they couldn't do, right? The championship game got shut out. The first 2 games this season, under 10 points. I know there was issues with Wade and A.J., but again, that's another reason why I think Pardee deserves a shot at head coach. This offense has gotten much better under him. There was the 2 weeks during week 5 and 6 where it looked like it got fully, kind of felt out and everybody knew what it was. But since then, a couple of good performances. Kevin Hogan. At times he looks really bad, but overall he's looked pretty solid at certain times as well. The DC game, he looked pretty solid overall. The Memphis game, turnovers were bad, but aside from that, he was okay. Now, I'm not saying he was good by any means, but the bottom line is, was he as bad as Anthony Brown? No. Yeah, the turnovers look bad. Again, very similar like the Showboats quarterbacks of E.J. Perry and T-Will. His highs are really high and his lows are really, really low. The point is, though, this is under Peyton Pardee. I would like to see what he could do with a full season as being the head coach. Not having this looming presence of Will Wade come back, not dealing with all the drama with it, whether it be the A.J. Smith stuff, the Wade Phillips thing. Just come back as head coach. It will be very interesting to see what he would do with this team. That's why I do want to see him come back. I think it would be interesting to see him have a real shot at being a head coach, not just an interim. So, for him, 2 head coach. Number 7 is the Showboats. Look, I'm going to say it like it is. Last year, the Showboats were objectively a worse team than the Roughnecks, but I kept the Roughnecks below the Showboats because the Showboats beat them twice. Pretty much doing something very similar here. At this point, I think most people would think the Showboats might be a better team than the Roughnecks, which is debatable because, again, turnover differential, you're still dead last, though you did get a lot in this game. They over doubled their total in takeaways. And third down percentage is still worse in the league, but they're pretty middle of the road in a lot of other stats. Bottom line is, you lost to Houston twice. Last year, I punished Houston for losing twice to Memphis. Same thing here. So Memphis, you're staying at 7. You're probably going to stay there the rest of the season. The only team you really have a good shot at overtaking is Arlington, unless you finish 2-0 and Houston loses out. Then obviously I'm going to move you back above them. Barring that, 7 is probably where you're going to stay the rest of the season. Look, this team's middle of their own a lot of stats, but they're, of course, last in turnover differential and third down percentage. Turnover differentials by a country mile. T-Will, not a great game. Overtime, he looked good, but again, overtime is 2-point conversion play, so is that really saying that much? I would assume that E.J. Perry probably starts next week, considering Jim Turner's decision to try and play all 3 quarterbacks. Not much to say here again. You won the Tank Bowl. You're still 2-6. Your only 2 wins were in overtime. Not really any much more to say about the Showboats. You're number 7. Now, Jim Turner, 2 head coach, not head coach. I'm honestly going to say not head coach. And the biggest reason is I feel like there's 2 other guys that both deserve this kind of more. The fact that this quarterback decision that they're doing, where they're probably going to play 3 different quarterbacks to end the season, a lot of it is because of Noel. He joined the team like fully as the OC, middle of the road, about April 16th. Now, that means he didn't get a full experience with guys like Troy Williams and E.J. Perry to the extent that the other coaches did. Now, I think that's part of it is seeing who he wants to bring back as quarterback next year. And then, of course, Jaron Horton. The defense has been much better than last year. Again, as we talked about it, despite not getting many takeaways, they're still solid in a lot of stats in points allowed and yards per game compared to other teams that have more sacks, more passes defended, more takeaways. If anything, that means that the Showboats defense is kind of playing in over its head. And that shows good coaching by Jaron Horton. The fact is, I don't look at Turner and say, of those 3 guys, he's the one that needs to be a head coach. I would rather have the other 2 guys be head coach, and that's the main reason I'm saying not to head coach. The fact is, would I rather have Horton or my zone coach? Yes. And that's what it really comes down to. I'd rather have the guy that's focused on the offense or defense more. If you're Jim Turner, in theory, you shouldn't have needed to bring in Noel to be the OC if you're doing as much as Wisnant was doing. Obviously, you weren't. So that's kind of another strike against him. He's kind of just putting head coach to be the head coach title, whereas the other interim coaches kind of feel like they're becoming the head coach. He still very much feels like an interim coach, which is why I don't think they should bring him back as head coach. They should promote from within, put one of those 2 guys at head coach instead. So that's my opinion on the Showboats head coach. Number 6 is the Roughnecks. You fall 1 more spot again. Kind of have to. The bottom line is you lost to Danny Etling, and you lost pretty bad. Now, yes, the final score doesn't indicate how much Danny Etling put on them. There was a pick 6 that was thrown, and that kind of, ballooned the score for Michigan. But at the same token, Houston scored a touchdown with literally no time remaining. So in terms of the differential, it's about the same. But in terms of total score, it's not like the defense allowed 30 points to Danny Etling. They did allow a lot, though. Look, you're still lower end on defense. 150 points allowed, 300 yards per game allowed is two of the worst numbers in the league, right? Tied for that second worst in points allowed, and you are the second worst team in yards per game allowed. Turnover differential, you're still solid, but not great. And it's not like it's really doing anything for you. And offensively, again, as we talked about in the Missed the Playoffs video, one of the weaker units overall. Look, the biggest thing with this team is that the quarterback play has just been too inconsistent, right? Overall, you have Jalen McClendon, who looked really great the first couple weeks and still looks better than any other quarterback we've had all season, but he's not playing a full game consistently anymore. He's giving you great drives followed by not great drives, right? The second half against Birmingham is a prime example of that. He went from this incredible first half to doing virtually nothing in the second half. As you all know, I'm a huge Jalen McClendon fan. There's no defending how the last 2 weeks have gone for him. This team is too good of a receiving core to be this inconsistent. But I know some people say that's not McClendon's fault because to head coach or not to head coach with Curtis Johnson, the answer is obviously not to head coach. 5-5 in 2023. That's about all he's had. Since then, it's just been pitiful. Now, it's important to note that in that season, Kenji Bahar actually gave a very solid season at quarterback for the Gamblers, and Mark Thompson had overall one of the 2 best spring football ultramodern era running back seasons, that or the Amos Smith season. Basically depended if you want yards or touchdowns more. That's why the team was as good as they were. And even then, they still missed the playoffs. 2024, finished 1-9, got beat twice by a Showboats team that was dead last in essentially every single statistical category. This season, won against the bad teams, had momentum, and then blew it against Birmingham. You win one or both those games against Birmingham because you easily could have won both. You could have won the Arlington game. You choked them. The decision to basically have your quarterback room the exact opposite as it should be is another big issue. You should have started McClendon from the start. You should have had Henderson at the backup, and you should have had Anthony Brown as the third stringer. Instead, you went with the hype of Anthony Brown. Guess what? He was terrible. You put Nolan Henderson. He had one solid game, but then he got hurt as soon as he was looking good, and McClendon came in and made you look like an even bigger moron for not starting him in the first place. There's nothing to say. Shouldn't be the head coach. This team, for how much we can blame quarterback, at the end of the day, this team's fault lies in coaching. You overhauled the roster. You kept only the truly elite talent, aside from Chris Odom when you lost, but you kept overall the elite talent from last year this season. Yet you still suck. That's on Curtis, not the head coach. Number 5 is the Arlington Renegades. Barely moved you up. You really don't deserve to move up, but here's the thing. Arlington did not do anything to deserve moving up, right? People say this close game is a good thing about them. No, it's not. This is every single game in the season, which I'll talk more about in the missed playoffs video and when the two head coach, not head coach. This team did nothing to earn moving up. It's that Houston ended up earning the ability to move down. This game against DC proved every issue with Arlington. Legitimately, they are the second best team in the league. There is no arguing that. My take that I just said is factually infallible. Here's the issue, though. They're second best to every team in the league at this point. No matter who they play, they will give them this insanely tight, contested battle and will find a way to lose. Eliminate week 1, where they played a team we didn't realize at the time was as bad as they were under A.J. Smith and Wade Phillips with that Brahms team. The Houston game. Houston was a 2-point conversion away from forcing OT with Anthony Brown at quarterback. The Michigan game a couple weeks ago had the win, guaranteed win. Michigan gave you 2 free fumbles that were going to give you the W. You let them score a game-winning touchdown and extra point. This game, Luis Perez decides he's going to fake spike it in field goal range with a kicker who's already made a kick longer than that. Throws an interception. You lose. Birmingham, officiating's not why you lost. You lost that one because you went 0-4 in the red zone. Even their wins were unimpressive. The St. Louis win, as I've talked about before, you didn't really beat the Battlehawks, right? The Battlehawks had a fumble when Manny Wilkins tore his Achilles. You scored a touchdown off that. So that touchdown shouldn't be on the board. And your last pick 6 was the last play of the game. I know I've had somebody ask why count theirs but not the other teams, because one of them happened at the very end of the game. If Sailors runs in a touchdown, instead of them deciding to throw it 3 straight times, Battlehawks win that game. You only have 2 wins on the season. The Renegades, in all honesty, should be number 6. Because any team above them, they would more than likely lose at the last second. It's just that Houston, I cannot get over them blowing that lead to Birmingham and then losing to the Danny Etling Panthers. Overall for Arlington, no matter how good some of these stats are, this team was a failure this season. And let's just say we're going to get a part 2 to that Showboats Missed the Playoffs video last year. So make sure you subscribe with the bell turn on for that video. Now, Bob Stoops, 2 head coach, not head coach, not head coach. At this moment, I can't believe I'm saying this for the college legend, he is the worst coach in the league right now. For how much I want to rag on Curtis Johnson, at this point, there is no defending Bob Stoops in this Renegades team. When in back-to-back seasons, you've choked and blown away as many games they have. State of the Stallions posted a Twitter post saying he's never seen a team basically, essentially escape the jaws of victory by grabbing defeat like the 2025 Renegades. My immediate comment was, I have the 24 Renegades. Last year, the game against St. Louis should have won. They blew it. Game against DC should have won it. They blew it. The game against Michigan should have won it. They blew it. The San Antonio games, they could have won both of them. They blew them. The Houston game, you lost to Curtis Johnson in that Tank Bowl. You blew it. Even the Week 1 game, it was tight until you let the Deion Kane, Matt Corral touchdown at the end of the half happen. This season, exact opposite. Instead of finishing 3-1, you started 3-1. But even then, again, the cracks were showing. Both the Houston and St. Louis wins, you arguably should have lost them. You should have lost St. Louis. I wouldn't say you should have, but you almost lost to Houston. Birmingham should have won that, no excuse. DC, largest blown lead until the Roughnecks broke the record. St. Louis again in week 6. You lost to a team that put up 12 points. You deserve to lose. Michigan, nothing needs to be said. DC, nothing needs to be said. Just pitiful. I know the final score there shows 33-37. That wasn't the final score. Wikipedia having a meltdown. Point is, you blew it. L, trash, whatever, not good. Bob Stoops, not head coach, 100% shouldn't be back. Coming in at number 4 is the DC Defenders. No change for DC. Now, this is pretty much because of how my rankings were last week and how the games kind of all played out. Look, I've said it before, and I'll just get right off the chase. I think DC's become the most overrated team in the league right now. I know, me saying that it's not St. Louis is probably shocking to a lot of people, but the truth is, this DC team really isn't as good as a lot of people are trying to make it out to be. I've seen so many people on Twitter especially try to act like this team is the best team in the league and second best, which, no. We kind of firmly established the 2 best teams in the league about 3 weeks ago, and since then those 2 teams have kept winning, so they're supposed to be the 2 best teams in the league. DC has kind of proven why they're really not. This game against Arlington was another prime example of it. Look, this defense is the worst of the top 4 teams. There's 4 teams in the playoffs. The weakest defense by far is DC. That's despite Michigan dealing with injuries to 3 of their 5 most important players. Despite that, this defense is still the worst in the league. They are literally tied for last in points allowed, and yards per game, they're not last. A lot of that's, again, week 1. If that week 1 game against Alex Mew doesn't happen, this defense is by far the worst in the league. Jordan Ta'amu, I'll give him credit, though. Last 2 weeks, he's been solid. Now, Perkins still should get MVP, but he won't. It will go to Ta'amu at this point because Perkins, odds are he's not going to see the field till week 10. There's no reason to play him against Birmingham. Expose your playbook, get him hurt. He's probably going to play a couple snaps in week 10. Ta'amu, he's probably going to be the MVP. And the bottom line is he went from not having any argument and him being shoehorned into actually deserving it. The last 2 weeks have been really solid by him. I have to give him credit for it. Now, his completion percentage on the season is still horrid, and there's no defending it. There's no saying, oh, he's throwing deep balls. Yeah, most quarterbacks throw deep balls, still complete more than 55% of their passes. But he's been much more consistent. Hasn't been turning the ball over. I can't be upset about that. He's played great football the last 2 weeks. Again, him and Perkins are firmly the 2 best QBs in the league, and everybody else is pretty much a distant third. So, give him a lot of credit. But the defense is still pitiful, and the ground game is horrid. Look, Deion Jackson, the Abram Smith combo, it's a rough watch. Abram Smith may have gotten a touchdown this week, but it's rough. I mean, they are the second to worst team in the league in yards per rush, and that is a bad thing. They're just not a good team on the ground. This is why they're still 4th. The number 3 and 2 teams played each other, and it was as tight a game as you can get. Why should I punish the team that lost that one to the team that I viewed was better than them? So it went exactly as expected, whereas DC played a team I view as much worse than those 2 teams and were a fake spike away from potentially losing in overtime while allowing even more points. I can't reward DC for them not really doing anything impressive this week. Again, their defense is the weakest of the big 4 teams. Their ground game is the weakest of the big 4 teams. I know CJ Marable had that fumble. Bottom line is, overall, this is the weakest ground game and the weakest defense. Those are the 2 things you really need to win a championship. They are the weakest of the top 4 teams in both those areas. So why should I reward this team and moving up to 3, or as some people are going to do, move up to 2? I just don't see an argument for it. They're not the best team in the XFL conference. They're just not. Haven't been for the past couple of weeks. They're not better than the top teams in the USFL. So number 4 is where you go. Third down percentage is great, but again, still losing ground to Michigan. Yards per game is another thing. You're still 1st, but Michigan was closing in. Turnover differential, credit there too. Really solid there, but again, a lot of this is early in the season. Defense, last 4 weeks of the season, man, this defense has been a rough unit. There's an argument the last few weeks they've been the worst defense in the league. Yes, I know Malik Fisher, Joe Wallace give you some great stats, but overall this team is consistently allowing just so many points. Once you get to the playoffs, I don't know if it's going to work out for you. Number 4, DC. Shannon Harris, 2 head coach, though sadly nobody really is expecting him to. Look, we all know the whole thing, right? When Reggie Barlow left for the Tennessee job, like Tennessee State job, it was essentially a foregone conclusion that this entire DC staff was going to go with him. These guys have been with him for a while. Now, I think a lot of people do agree. If anyone's going to stay here, it would be Blake Williams and or Shannon Harris. Those are the only two guys you could really see staying, but the odds of them staying are low. Now, I hope Shannon stays. Of course, we got the classic DC Dorman, that joke that we get to use because of the Week 1 game. Got to give him a lot of credit. This team was not supposed to be this good this season, and he's done a lot for this team. Again, they lost their defensive coordinator. Again, they basically replaced Greg Williams with Greg Williams, but they still lost their DC. Overall, I mean, it's impressive what they've done this season. Again, they put up over 30 points 3 times this season. They put up over 20 another time. Never had a single game where they put up less than 10 points, which is a big deal. A lot of credit to Shannon Harris and what he's done with his team. I hope he comes back, though again, the odds of him coming back are not great. Though, the better this team does, in a sense, I think there's a better chance Shannon comes back. If, let's say, they win the playoff game against St. Louis, then losing the championship, I wouldn't be too shocked if he returns. But again, it's about the money. What are you going to get at Tennessee State being an assistant? Does he want to get the title and prestige being a head coach versus being a lower-end guy that's a positional coach? We'll see. Overall, though, number 4, the DC Defenders, 2 head coach, not head coach, Shannon Harris, 2 head coach. Number 3 is the Stallions. I'm not going to punish you for a 1-point loss to the second best team in the league when you're playing your 5th quarterback. Jamar Smith was inaccurate as hell, but overall still put up 3 touchdowns, was really great deep ball. Yes, the turnover differential in the season is a big deal, but it's basically been -3 for the past 4 weeks, so am I really that upset about it? No. Biggest reason you're still up here. Statistically, it's the best defense in the league. 267 yards per game, incredible. 105 points allowed, the best in the league. Now, I do personally got St. Louis's defense I'd rather have in my team, but statistically, it's the best defense in the league. I'm not going to punish you versus DC when you have, by a country mile, a better defense. I mean, by a huge margin, a better defense than DC. Your ground game, even with the fumbles we had, is a better unit than DC's ground game. And your passing attack is mainly just battered because of injuries. Come on. And special teams is one of the best, if not the best special teams unit in the league. Again, they're currently averaging the best in punt return and kick return yards. The amount of times you see Birmingham start a drive past the 30-yard line is just remarkable. I'm putting them at number 3. They didn't do anything to really justify moving down. DC didn't really do anything to justify moving up, right? Which is more impressive, beating the number 5 team for my power rankings by 3 or losing to the number 2 team by 1? I think we can all agree losing to the number 2 team by 1. Which is more impressive, having a more consistent quarterback that's playing really well, or having a significantly better defense and a better ground game? Again, the ground game and defense. So, number 3, the Birmingham Stallions. Skip Holtz, 2 head coach. Look, there may have been some issues this season. There's a lot of bad-looking sideline interactions and all that. The bottom line is, he's a 3-time champ. He's in the playoffs again. There is a very real possibility he will be a 4 straight champion. And at that point, the joke is true. Just name the trophy the Skip Holtz Award. I mean, he just keeps getting it done, right? People said, oh, they lost their GM. It's going to be bad this year. Yes, they broke the record for most losses in a season. They're still in the playoffs. So, if you're the Stallions, who really cares? You're still in the playoffs. Your next 2 weeks don't really mean anything. You can just try to get healthy, which is the biggest issue. Because again, health has been the biggest issue for the Stallions team. They haven't been healthy. So if they can get healthy the next 2 weeks, I mean, come on. There's a real chance they could beat Michigan in the playoff game, and they'll be right back in the championship game. We'll see. Number 3, the Stallions. Coming in number 2 is St. Louis Battlehawks. No change, no reason to change it. Yes, this win against Birmingham was a big deal, but the bottom line with the Panthers winning without Bryce Perkins really shows this team is better than we really thought it was. A lot of people were thinking this team was basically Bryce Perkins or bust. Without Perkins, they still got a W. They're still number 1 to me. The Battlehawks, though, they're still number 2. I think that there's going to be a lot of people that don't put these teams in the top 2 like this, and it's going to be very questionable, mainly if they put DC up here. Point is, great defense. I think this is the best defense in the league. I think this is a better unit than Birmingham. When you compare who they've played versus Birmingham, it's a big reason I say that. So, a lot of credit to their defense. Turnover differential, Again, they're one of the 4 teams that is a legit, or one of the 3 teams that have more than 1 in the plus or minus area. So, big deal there. Look at all these stats they're leading. Punt net average leader, sack leader, rushing yard leader, punt return yard leader, punt net average leader, and rushing yards per game leader. Now, Max Duggan question mark. That's a big one. Max Duggan is passer-wise of the 4 quarterbacks, not even pass. Of the 4 quarterbacks, he's the weakest of the 4. Like, let's just call it like it is. He is the weakest quarterback that's going to start for any of the 4 playoff teams. That's even saying Danny Etling starts. Because at least Danny has historically given you a couple of good games here or there. Duggan in the air has been, let's call it like it is, bad. He gave you 1 good week. This past week, he had some flashes, but 65.8 passer rating is inexcusable. 55 completion percent is really bad. Now, 15 sacks taken is also really bad. And a decent amount of those sacks are on him holding the ball too long. I've talked about it a lot in stream. Max Duggan is not a traditional quarterback in the sense where he, drops back and throws. He does the wind-up motion. So every time he's throwing the ball, he is taking essentially 2 to 3 times longer to throw the ball than your average quarterback does. That means that when he's on the run, there's a better chance for inaccurate throws. It means when he's in the pocket, there's a better chance that he'll be strip fumbled. Better chance he'll be sacked because he's doing a long throwing motion. It's been a big issue for this team since he's become the starter, and we're still seeing it. It's a big reason why he might not have made it in the NFL. When you're doing that, having that long throwing motion, it just impacts a lot. And we're seeing that. Now, his ground game is incredible. He's an incredible runner. But so was Manny. Like, at the end of the day, if you're a Battlehawks fan, you kind of wish you had Manny Wilkins back in the saddle. But obviously, he's not walking through that door. So, you're having with Duggan. That's the biggest issue with this team. But overall, the ground game, Sailors was looking more like the early season Sailors, which if he's like that, this team is going to be really good on the ground. Then, of course, again, your defense, I think is the best defense in the league. Great special teams unit. Hot Rod missed his first kick because it was short. Still accurate, so accuracy-wise, hasn't missed a kick. Just power-wise, he did. So, number 2, the Battlehawks. Anthony Beck had 2 head coach, not head coach, 2 head coach. Why? For the first time in his career as a head coach, he won an important game. The biggest issue with Anthony Beck is historically, he was a choke artist when it came to winning big games. The Dragons in Week 9, right? The Stallions last year, the Brahmas in the playoffs. Whenever he faced a big game, he and the team shriveled. Not this year. The Arlington rematch. That was a must-win game. You lose that game, your chances of making the playoffs would have imploded. You would have been 0-2 against the Renegades, meaning you had no head-to-head, meaning you would have to finish with a better record. You barely escaped Michigan, with most people saying it was because of Etling. If you had lost that game to Arlington, this team probably goes on to lose to Memphis and Birmingham. They probably fall off a cliff and they're done. They didn't. They won the game. It was an ugly win. 12-6 is an ugly game, but you won. And then you beat Memphis. You didn't blow it. Then Birmingham, the big matchup, the one you couldn't win last year. You got the job done. Got to give him his props. It may have taken 3 years as a head coach, but again, we've always said 3 years is for pretty much everything. The rule of threes, right? Your third game, your third season. Finally, he's winning games that matter. Last year's season wasn't insanely impressive, right? They finished first in the XL Conference because they beat the Brahmas, because the Brahmas were entirely banged up and hurt. They couldn't win a single big game last year. But this year, got it done. 2 games so far they've won that were big deals. They won them both. Now there's no more important game till the playoffs. Even the Week 10 game against DC really doesn't matter unless they really want to play for bragging rights. So, we'll see how they do in the playoffs, but that's number 2. Number 1, the Panthers. You won with Danny Etling at quarterback, and Etling played an incredible game. 14-22 for 3 touchdowns, 167, 126 passer rating, incredible game. Bryce Perkins, when he's back, he's been the best quarterback in the league. Just as an overall quarterback, he's the best by far. The fact is his passer rating is incredible. TD interception ratio when you also add in what he's done on the ground. He has 14 touchdowns. He has 2 interceptions, 1 fumble gave. Again, rushing touchdown-wise, literally 2 of the guys that are leading the league are Toa and Bryce Perkins, and Toa hasn't even played all season. Yards per game, they're just barely behind DC, and third down percentage is the best in the league. Defense isn't incredible, but again, Javin White hurt, Frank Idna hurt, Breland Speaks hurt. So, a lot of injuries, still a solid unit. They're still definitely the second to worst defense in the league, or not in the league, but in the 4 playoff teams, but it's still good enough to get the job done. It's going to be very much about, is Bryce Perkins fully healthy when he comes back? Are they going to sit him for the next week? Are they going to play him a bit in week 10 to get him back? How are they going to handle it? Because, of course, last year, right, against the Stallions in the playoff game, you didn't have Perkins because he got hurt in week 10. So you had Danny Etling play the whole game, which was going fine until the third quarter happened. So we'll see. But number one, not much to say. Again, if you're number 1 or number 2 and you just keep winning, I can't really do anything. Number 1, the Panthers. Now, 2 head coach, not the head coach, Mike Nolan, 2 head coach. Look, we all know about the issue with Bryce Perkins and Danny Etling, that awful issue. But there's no denying the turnaround he's done for this Panthers team after the Jeff Fisher experience, making them into a 3 straight playoff team now. Made it in 2023, made it in 2024, making it again in 2025. No discrediting that. And yes, again, the Bryce Perkins Danny Etling thing was really aggravating this season. It was really bad. But again, the defense really banged up, still winning. The Samson Nakua slap incident came back, didn't do anything, and the next week scored a touchdown. Big deal. The game against Arlington, we're able to pull that one off at the very end, getting the timeout called. It's just been very solid. Since that St. Louis game, this team has basically been the best team in the league. Again, their only close one was Arlington, but like I said earlier, that's literally Arlington every single week. The fact that you dismantled DC and just broke the spirit of Houston this week, got to give it to the guy who was coach of the year last year. So 2 head coach, not the head coach, Mike Nolan, 2 head coach. But overall, that'll do it. This has been Zom Fox. Enjoy this video. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. Again, I've got a ton of videos coming out this week. There's already one that came out earlier today about the Roughnecks missing the playoffs. Expect about 8 more videos to come out during the weekdays this week. Again, we have the eliminated or missed the playoffs and playoff bound for another like 4 teams or 5 teams at this point. Yeah, 5 teams. My week review tomorrow. Tank Bowl video should be coming out Wednesday or Thursday. Game picks on Friday. Players of the Week winners on Wednesday. Of course, the stream on Friday, a stream on the weekend. So make sure you subscribe to the bell, turn on for all that. Like this video, think about becoming a community member. And as always, guys, have a great night.